Welcome. This is Eyes Closed. Somewhere in your house, there is ink in a pen on a desk or in a drawer or in the marker someone left on the kitchen counter, in the printed words of a book on your nightstand, in the label on a bottle or a jar, in a receipt from today already forgotten, in a pocket or a bag. Ink is everywhere, and it is almost entirely invisible to us. We look through it to see the words it carries. We look past it to see the image it forms. The ink itself, the substance, the material, the thing that was manufactured and applied to a surface, we never really see at all. But ink has a history as long as human thought. The desire to leave a mark, to take something that exists in the mind and fix it somewhere that will last longer than the moment, longer than the memory, longer perhaps than the life of the person who made it, is one of the oldest human impulses we know of. 40,000 years ago, someone mixed pigment and fat and water in a cave in southern France and painted a horse on a wall of stone. The horse is still there. The person who painted it, not, but something of them remains. The choice they made, the image they decide to fix, the mark they left on the world. That impulse has not changed. The student who writes their name on a desk, the traveler who carves their initials into a tree, the writer who puts words on a page, hoping that someone, somewhere, sometime will read them. The parent who writes a date on the back of a photograph, the child who draws on the wall in crayon and is told off for it, the impulse to mark, the impulse to say, I was here. This is what I saw. This is what I thought. This is what I wanted to leave behind. Tonight, we are going to follow ink from the carbon soot of ancient fires to the oak gauze of the medieval scriptorium, from the Gutenberg press to the ballpoint pen, from the letter written by hand on a cold evening to the molecule in a printed cartridge that is deposited by a jet of air onto a piece of paper at a rate of millions of drops a second. It is a quiet story, a story about marks and what they mean. Find your position, the real one. Take one slow breath in and let it out. Let's begin. The desire to make a mark is older than civilization. It may be older than language itself, or at least it developed alongside language as another way of carrying meaning from one mind to another, from one moment to another, across distances that speech cannot cross. 40,000 years ago, in the caves of Chauvet and Altamira and Lascaux, in the limestone hills of what is now France and Spain, human beings went deep into the earth with fire, hand painted. The painting of Lascaux covered the walls and ceilings of the cave systems. Horses, aurochs, deers, a charging bull, a rhinoceros. They were made with pigments ground from minerals, iron ochre from the warm reds and yellow, manganese dioxide for the black, mixed with animal fat or water and applied to the stone surface by hand, by brush, by blowing through a hollow bone. The animals are depicted with an energy and accuracy that still astonish people who see them for the first time. The horses moves, the bull charges, the deer turns its head. The people who painted them were not primitive or clumsy. They were skilled artists who had studied their subjects with extraordinary attention and found ways to translate what they saw into marks on stone that carry the observation intact 40,000 years later. At Lascaux and at Cueva de las Manos in Argentina, and at a dozen of other sites around the world, the painters also left handprints. They placed their hands against the wall and blew pigment around them, leaving a negative impression, a hand-shaped absence in the field of color. A hand on the wall, the most direct possible statement. Here, this hand, this person, present in this place at this moment. The oldest ink, if we call the pigment mixed with fat and blown on stone walls ink, is 40,000 years old and still perfectly legible. The mark has lasted. The oldest manufactured ink as we might recognize it, a liquid applied to a surface with a tool, is carbon black ink. Carbon black is produced by burning organic material in a limited oxygen environment. The result is a fine powder of nearly pure carbon, the same element as diamond, but in an amorphous form, disordered, light enough to float in air, black enough to absorb almost all light visible. Carbon black pigment is one of the most stable colorants known. It does not fade in light. It does not react with the surface it is applied to. It does not change color with age. The carbon in a 4,000-year-old inscription is the same carbon that went into the lamp that produced it. To make ink from carbon black, the pigment must be suspended in a liquid carrier that will allow it to be applied to a surface and will then bind it there as it dries. The ancient solution was gum arabic, the dried sap of the acacia tree dissolved in water. Gum arabic is a natural polymer, a long chain molecule that forms a sticky, flexible film when dry, binding the carbon particles to the writing surface. Mix carbon black with a solution of gum arabic in water, and you have ink. This ink was used in ancient Egypt for writing on papyrus. It was used in ancient China for writing on silk and bamboo and paper. It was used by scribes across the ancient Middle East. The Egyptian word for ink and the Egyptian word for water were closely related. Ink was, to the ancient Egyptian understanding, a kind of charged or meaningful water, water that carries marks. Egyptian scribes used two inks, black for the main body of text, red made from ochre, an iron oxide mineral, mixed with the same gum Arabic binder. For headings, for the first word of a new section, for emphasis, for corrections. The red and black manuscript, with its particular visual rhythm of heading and text, is a format that survived the ancient Egypt through the medieval scriptorium and into the age of print. We still speak of red letter days, days marked in red in the calendar, significant days, feast days, days worth noticing. The red letter goes back to the Egyptian scribe reaching for the red pot to mark something important. Carbon ink, the same basic formula of carbon black and gum arabic in water, is still used today. India ink, used by illustrators and calligraphists and comic artists, is carbon black in a shellac or gum carrier. Archival quality, as permanent as anything made by human hands. 4,000 years of the same recipe because it works. To apply ink to a surface, you need a tool. The history of writing tools is the history of finding ways to deliver a controlled, consistent amount of ink to a specific point on a surface repeatedly with enough precision to form recognizable letters. The earliest writing tools were simple. A sharpened reed, the same plant that grew in abundance along the Nile and the rivers of Mesopotamia, cut at an angle at its tip. The tip split to create a small channel that held ink by capillary action. Dip the reed in ink, apply it to the surface. The ink flows from the reservoir to the split tip onto the papyrus or parchment or paper beneath. Reed pans were used in ancient Egypt, in ancient Greece, across the ancient Middle East. They were workable but limited. The reed tip wore down quickly and had to be recut frequently. The natural flexibility of the reed gave some variation in line weight. Pressing harder spread the split tip and produced a wider stroke. Lifting the pressure narrowed it. But the control was limited. The quill pen was different. A quill is a larger flight leather from a goose, most commonly, or from a swan, or a crow, or a turkey. The hollow shaft of the feather is tubular and strong, and when the tip is cut with a sharp knife, the pen knife, which is exactly that, it produces a nib of extraordinary precision. The flexibility of the quill shafts give the quill pen its characteristic sensitivity. Pressing harder on the nib spreads the two halves of the split tip and produces a broader stroke. Lifting the pressure brings the nib together and produces a fine hairline. The variation between thick and thin strokes in a single letter, the characteristic weighted variation of calligraphy, is produced by controlled variations of pressure on the quill as it moves across the page. A skilled calligrapher with a well-cut quill could produce lettering of extraordinary beauty. The manuscripts of the medieval scriptorium, the illuminated books produced by monastic scribes, with their dense and perfect texts and their painted decorations, were made with quills, cut fresh each day by the scribe themselves. The preparation of the quill was a skill itself. The feather had to be cured, dried and hardened before cutting. The tip had to be shaped in a specific way depending on the script being written. The split had to be precise, too long, and the nib was too flexible, too short, and it was too stiff. A good scribe spent as much time preparing their tools as they spent using them. The quill was the primary writing tool of Europe from roughly the 6th century CE to the 19th, over 1,000 years. Every manuscript produced in medieval scriptorium, every contract and deed and legal document, every letter between rulers and between lovers, every scientific paper and every poem and every recipe and every prayer, all of it written with a feather. In the ancient and medieval world, a second type of ink emerged alongside carbon black that would become to dominate European writing for over 1,000 years. Iron gall ink. Iron gall ink is made from two main ingredients: oak galls, the small, round, hard growths that appear on oak trees when a gull wasp lays eggs inside a developing bud, and iron sulfate, a crystalline mineral salt. Oak galls form as a tree responds to the presence of the lava, building a protective structure around it, and incidentally creates a dense mass of tannins, the same chemical compounds found in wine and tea and many plant materials. The tannins are the active ingredient. To make iron gall ink, the galls are crushed and soaked in water, leaching out the tannins into the liquid. Iron sulfate is dissolved separately, and the two solutions are combined. The iron ions react with the tannins acidic to form iron tannate, a compound that is initially a rather pale blue-gray color. Here is the remarkable thing about iron gall ink. When you write with it, the words appear in this pale blue-gray, not black, not the dense carbon black of soot ink, a rather tentative, watery gray-blue. But as the ink oxidizes in the air, as the iron tannate reacts with the oxygen, it darkens. Over hours and days, the pale inscription deepens to a rich, dense black. The words become themselves gradually. The ink finishes drying and becoming on the page. Iron gall ink produces the darkest, densest black of any ink in pre-industrial history, denser than carbon ink on most surfaces, with a particular lustrous quality on good vellum. The surface almost seems to hold the light differently where the ink has sunk in. The manuscripts written in iron gall ink, the letters of Leonardo da Vinci, the musical scores of John and Sebastian Bach, the journals of Charles Darwin, The first drafts of countless literary works have a particular quality of darkness and premisance that carbon ink does not quite match. But iron gall ink has its flaw. It is acidic. The tannin acid that makes it work also slowly attacks the paper or parchment it is written on. The acid from the ink migrates into the fibers and of the writing surface, and over decades and centuries breaks them down. The paper becomes brittle around the lines of writing. In extreme cases, the ink literally eats through the paper. The words are still perfectly legible. The ink still dense and dark, but the paper around them has deteriorated to the point of crumbling. This is happening right now in the archives of the world. The musical manuscript of Bach, the notebooks of Leonardo, the letters of historical figures who wrote on paper with iron gall ink centuries ago. They are destroying themselves from within. Slowly, the acid of the ink working on the fibers of the paper across the years. Conservators race to stabilize them, treating the paper with alkaline solutions to neutralize the acid, storing them in controlled conditions that slow the chemical reactions. The goal is not to stop the process, but to slow down enough that the documents survive as long as possible. The music of Bach dissolving the paper it is written on, the ink outlasting the surface it needs. There is something in this that is hard to fully sit with. In monasteries of medieval Europe, a special room was set aside for the production of manuscript. The scriptorium, from the Latin scribere, to write, the writing room. The scriptorium was usually on the south side of the cloister to catch as much daylight as possible. The work required good light, and artificial light was expensive and carried the risk of fire near the vellum and the wooden furnishings. The monk scribes worked at slanted desk. The manuscripts held at an angle that allowed them to write without the shadows of their hands falling across the work. No talking was permitted in the scriptorium. Communications was held by hand signals, a system of agreed gestures for requesting specific things. Hold out the right hand with the fingers together and wave it in a smooth motion. I need paper. Scratch behind the ear like a dog. I need quill. The silence of the scriptorium was not a rule imposed from outside, but a practical necessity. The work required concentration that conversation would break. The production of a manuscript was divided between specialists. The scribe wrote the text. The rubricator added the red headings and the red initial letters at the beginning of sections. From the Latin rubber, red. The illuminator painted the decorated initials and the border illustrations and the miniature paintings that accompanied the text. The binder assembled the completed pages into the finished book. Each of these was a distinct skill. A monastic library had scribes who were not illuminators, and illuminators who could not bind, and binders who could not write the script. The manuscript was a collaboration across these specialties, produced sometimes by a single house and sometimes distributed across several institutions. The scribes who copied manuscript, who spent their working lives writing on other people's words, occasionally left their own marks in the margin. Colophons, notes at the end of a complete manuscript, sometimes contain small personal observation from the scribe. One scribe wrote, "Just as the sailor yearns for the harbor after a long voyage, so the scribe yearns for the last line." Another, "Writing is excessive drudgery. It crooks your back, it dims your sight, it twists your stomach and your sides." Another simply, "Thank God it will soon be dark." The human voice in the margin of a sacred text, the scribe who was cold or tired or had been writing all day and was glad the light was falling and work was done. Their names are mostly gone. Their words remain. In the 1440s, Johannes Gutenberg was working on a problem that had never been solved: printing. The reproduction of image and text by pressing an ink surface onto paper or fabric had existed for centuries in various forms. Woodblock printing in China and Japan, the printing of patterns onto cloth in Europe. But printing words in bulk with movable type that could be rearranged for each page at a speed that could produce books in the hundreds, this did not exist yet. Gutenberg's contribution was not the press itself. Wine presses and oil presses were ancient technology, but the combination of movable metal type, a modified press, and a new kind of ink. The ink was a critical problem. The water-based ink used for writing by hand did not work for printing with metal type. They were too thin. They did not stick to the metal of the type. They tried too slowly. The resulting prints were blurry, inconsistent, unusable. What was needed was an oil-based ink, thick enough to coat the metal type evenly, adhesive enough to transfer cleanly through the paper under pressure, quick drying enough that the printed sheets could be stacked without smearing. Gutenberg developed this ink through years of experiment. Linseed oil, pressed from the seed of the flax plant, formed the base. The oil was cooked, thickening it and helping it dry faster by oxidation. Lead and other metal compounds were added as drying agents. Carbon black, the same pigment as ancient soot ink, was ground into this oily base. The result was a thick, sticky, intensely black ink that behaved completely differently from any ink that had existed before. It could be applied to metal type with a leather dauber, coating the raised letters evenly. It transferred to the paper under the pressure of the press in a sharp, clear impression. It dried quickly enough that the paper could be removed and the type re-inked for the next impression within minutes. The Gutenberg Bible, produced in Mainz, Germany, around 1455, was printed with this ink. The pages of the surviving copies, which can be examined in museums and libraries, show printing of extraordinary quality. The type is sharp and even. The ink is dense and consistent. The impression had not faded in 570 years. Gutenberg's oil-based printing ink is the direct ancestor of all printing ink that followed. The newspaper, printed in the 20th century, the magazines on a coffee table, the labels on bottles, the pages of every book produced in the last 5 centuries, all of them descendants of the ink that Gutenberg mixed in his workshop in Mainz, working out what would make a press print. The history of colored inks and dyes is a history of scarcity, substitution, and discovery. For most of human history, certain colors were rare and expensive because the natural sources of their pigments were rare and expensive. Blue was the hardest. The ancient world had few reliable sources of blue pigment. Lapis lazuli, the brilliant blue stone mined in a single location in what is now Afghanistan, could be ground into ultramarine pigment of extraordinary quality. But it was so expensive that in medieval Europe, ultramarine cost more than gold by weight. Painters who use ultramarine rationed it carefully. It was reserved for the most important figures in a painting. The Virgin Mary's robe is ultramarine blue in countless medieval European paintings, not because blue was Mary's color in any original theological sense, but because blue was the most costly color and the most important figure in the painting deserved the most costly color. The convention became so established that we still associate blue with Mary, centuries after ultramarine became cheap. Azurite, a copper mineral, provided a cheaper alternative, but a less stable one. Azurite blue fades and turns green over time. Many medieval paintings that were once brilliant blue have blue-gray or green skies today, the azurite having degraded across the centuries. The first synthetic blue pigment was discovered by accident in 1704. A German painter-maker named Johann Jacob Dies Bach was attempting to make a red pigment using iron sulfate and potash. His potash had been contaminated with animal oil. Potash from blood, a byproduct of another process. The contaminated potash reacted with the iron sulfate to produce, instead of red, a deep, intense blue, Prussian blue. The new pigment was chemically stable, easy to produce, and dramatically cheaper than any blue that had come before. It spread immediately through the workshops of Europe. Painters adopted it. Printmakers adopted it. Katsushika Hokusai adopted it. Hokusai is the great wave of Kanagawa, perhaps the single most reproduced image in the history of art. The print of the towering wave with Mount Fuji small in the background was printed using Prussian blue, imported to Japan from Europe in the early 19th century. The extraordinary blues of that image, the deep blue of the wave body, the pale blue of the foam, the blue-gray of the distant sky are Prussian blue, a synthetic pigment discovered in Berlin less than a century before the print was made. A European laboratory accident producing a pigment that traveled to Japan and was used to create one of the most recognized images in human visual culture. The interconnections of ink across cultures and centuries. Red was its own story. The most vivid red dye available in Europe for centuries came from the dried bodies of a small insect, the conical, native to the Americas, which lives as a parasite on prickly pear cactus. The insects were harvested by the Aztecs, who used the dye for textiles and body paint. The centuries before European contact. When the Spanish arrived in Mexico in the 16th century and encountered cochineal, they understood immediately that they had found something of enormous commercial value. The red it produced was more vivid and more stable than any red dye available in Europe. They established a monopoly on this trade and kept the source secret. The nature of cochineal, whether it was a plant product or an animal or a mineral, was debated in Europe for over a century. Eventually, the secret was out. Cochineal traveled the world. It colored the red coats of the British Army and the robes of the Catholic cardinals and the pigments of European painters. It is still used today, listed in food and cosmetic ingredient list as carmine or E120 or natural red 4. The vivid red of certain yogurts and lipsticks and fruit juice, dried insects ground to powder. The history of color is the history of unexpected things. For most of human history, writing required dipping. A quill or a reed pen held only a small reservoir of ink in its split tip, enough for a few letters, perhaps a word or two, before it needed to be returned to the inkwell. The rhythm of writing with a dip pen had this interruption built into it. Write, dip, write, dip. A regular pause in the flow of words while the tool is recharged. Inventors and users of writing implements had always wanted to eliminate the dip. A pen that contained its own reservoir of ink that could write continuously without interruption, that did not need to be held close to an inkwell. This was an obvious improvement if the engineering could be made to work. The first patents for fountain pens, pens with internal ink reservoirs, appeared as early as the 17th century, but early attempts were unreliable. The ink leaked, or it did not flow, or it flowed too much, too little, depending on the temperature or the angle of the pen. The problem was understanding what made ink flow. Ink flows through the narrow channel of a pen nib by capillary action, the same force that draws water up the stem of a plant, the same force that pulls the ink from the reservoir of a dip pen tip. But capillary action is sensitive to the geometry of the channel, the viscosity of the ink, the angle of the pen, the pressure of the air in the reservoir. Getting all these factors right reliably in a small device that could be carried in a pocket decades of refinement. By 1880s, the modern fountain pen was taking shape. The hard rubber barrel and cap, the gold nib, flexible enough to vary line width with pressure, hard enough to resist wear. The internal feed, a small element of grooved rubber or hard rubber that regulated the flow of the ink from the reservoir to the nib. Louis Waterman, an American insurance salesman, is often credited with developing the reliable modern fountain pen in 1884 after a leaking pen ruined an important contract signing, and he resolved to find something better. Whether this story is entirely accurate, it captures something true. The fountain pen was a solution to a real and daily frustration, developed by someone who had been let down one time too many by an ink that leaked at the wrong moment. The fountain pen became the prestige writing instrument of the late 19th and early 20th century. A good fountain pen was an object of quality. The nib adjusted and turned to the writer's pressure and angle. The ink chosen for its color and flow. The pen filled from a bottle with a ritual that has its own quiet pleasure. Writers who found fountain pens developed specific relationship with specific pens, specific inks. The particular blue-black of Waterman's Serenity Blue, the warm green of Diamine Meadow, the extraordinary shifting color of some modern demonstrators' inks that changed from blue to red as they dry. The fountain pen is still made and used today. It is a minority tool now. Most people write with ballpoints or type on keyboards, but the minority who use them tend to use them with a deliberateness and a pleasure that suggests the fountain pen offers something that faster tools do not. The slowing down that a fountain pen requires, the attention to the tool, to the ink, to the paper, the particular quality of thought that comes when you are writing slowly enough to think between the words. László Bíró was a Hungarian journalist in the 1930s who was tired of the fountain pen, not in the way that some people are tired of things they find complicated. Bíró was analytically tired of the fountain pen. He understood specifically what was wrong with it, and he thought about how to fix it. Fountain pens use thin, water-based inks that dried slowly. The ink could smear if the page was turned too quickly. The nib scratched the paper if held the wrong angle. The pen leaked when the pressure changed, on an airplane for instance, or simply when the pen was left uncapped in a warm pocket. What Bíró noticed, watching the printing presses of newspaper where he worked, was the printing ink was different from writing ink. Thick, oil-based, it dried almost instantly on the paper surface. It did not spear, it did not bleed. What if a pen could use thick, oil-based ink? The engineering problem was delivery. A quill or a fountain pen delivers ink by capillary action through a narrow split channel. Thick, oil-based ink is too viscous to flow through this kind of channel. It would not move. What if, instead of a channel, you used a small ball? A tiny metal ball seated in a socket at the tip of the pen, free to rotate. As the pen moved across the paper, the ball would roll, picking up thick ink from the cartridge above it and depositing it on the paper below. The rotation of the ball would feed ink to the paper without the need of capillary flow. Bíró developed this idea with his brother Georgi, a chemist who works on formulating the right ink, thick enough to stay in the cartridge without leaking, thin enough at the point of contact with the ball to transfer to the paper smoothly. They filed their patent in 1938 and continued developing the pen in Argentina, where they had fled to escape the war. The British Royal Air Force discovered the Bíró pen and licensed its design for their navigators. Fountain pens leaked at an altitude where the air pressure dropped, and the ballpoint did not. After the war, the technology entered the consumer market. Marcel Birch, a French stationer, licensed the Bíró patent in 1945 and spent 5 years refining the manufacturing process until the pen could be produced cheaply enough to be disposable. In 1950, he launched the Bic Cristal, a hexagonal polystyrene barrel, clear so you could see the ink level, a tiny tungsten carbide ball at the tip, less than 1 millimeter in diameter, polished to a tolerance of a friction of a micron, a cartridge of thick, oil-based ink in black or blue or red. Price, the equivalent of a few cents. The Bic Cristal has sold over 100 billion units, 100 billions of the same pen, more than 12 units for every person alive on Earth today. It is the most sought object in human history. A pen that costs almost nothing, that writes reliably almost anywhere, that never needs refilling, that can be lost or discarded without regret. The democratization of writing completed in a hexagonal plastic barrel. In the modern world, most ink is not applied by hand. The printer on a desk, if you have one, contains cartridges of ink that are fired onto papers in droplets, so small that they are invisible to the naked eye. An inkjet printer nozzle fires droplets of ink at a rate of millions per second, each droplet a few picoliters in volume. A picoliter is 1/trillionth of a liter. The dots are so fine, placed so precisely, that they combine into the continuous tones of a photograph or the sharp edges of a letter form without the individual dots being visible. The ink used in inkjet printers are water-based or oil-based solutions of dyes of pigments, some the same compounds as handwriting inks, some synthetic molecules developed specifically for the precision and speed of inkjet delivery. Laser printers do not use liquid ink at all. They use toner, a fine powder of pigment plastic particles, which is electrostatically attracted to the charged areas of a drum and then fused to the paper's surface by heat. What looks like ink on a laser printed page is tiny particles of melted plastic embedded in the fibers of the paper. The book you read on a screen contains no ink. The words are light, pixel illuminated to form letters, changing with each page turn, leaving no mark on anything. And yet, the culture of ink persists. The fountain pen has its devoted users, its ink collected for their colors and their behavior on different papers. The letterpress printing movement, printing with metal type and oil-based ink on fine paper by hand, slowly has grown as a deliberate alternative to digital speed. Hand calligraphy flourishes on social media of all places. The most practiced and patient of the making arts finding an audience on platforms designed for instant consumption. The mark made by hand means something that the automatically generated mark does not. Not because it is better, technically. Often it is not, but because it carries the evidence of its making in a way that a printed or digital text cannot. The slight variation in the pressure of a pen, the trace of the hand's movement in the varying weight of the stroke, the particular way this person makes a lowercase g or a capital M, different from every other person who has ever written a lowercase g or a capital M. The handwritten mark says, a person was here. This person with this hand making this particular pressure on this particular surface at this particular moment. It is still the most intimate form of communication we have, more intimate than the phone call in some ways, more intimate than the text message. The letter written by hand, the note left on a kitchen table, the card signed with a name and the particular ink of a person's particular pen, the mark that says, I was here and I wanted you to know. Think of something written by hand that you have kept. A card from someone, a note, a letter, perhaps something very old, a card from a grandparent in their handwriting, the particular loops and angles of their letters, the pressure of their hands on the surface. The ink in the letter is still there, fixed on the surface, holding the mark exactly as it was made. In the moment that the person sat down, picked up their pen, and decided to write something to you, the ink is more durable than almost anything else associated with that person, more durable than the voice, which is gone unless recorded, more durable than the smell, which memory holds imperfectly and fades, more durable than most objects, which wear out and break. The ink holds the mark. This is what ink was always for, not the communication of information. Information can be conveyed in many ways, but the fixing of a moment, the making permanent of something that would otherwise pass. The cave painter 40,000 years ago knew this. They went deep into the stone with their pigment and their fat and their hollow bone for blowing color, and they made marks that are still there in the dark, in the limestone, waiting. The mark has lasted, and somewhere in a drawer or a box or between the pages of a book, something written to you in ink by a hand that knew you is also still there, holding the moment, fixed on the surface, waiting. And that is where we will leave it tonight. You came here to rest, and I hope that is exactly what you are doing right now, or close to it, somewhere in that warm, quiet place between knowing and not knowing, between the story and the sleep. That is the whole point of this. If you made it all the way to the end,